Good afternoon. Today we're going to go through the gold standard demo for enterprise data management. Now, again, this is my view of gold standard, at least the core pieces of it. This loosely follows, at least in part, on demo content. There's a script out there called EDM Align Entity Maint demo script or entity maintenance. A lot of what I'm showing is part of that. I think that script was meant to actually showcase a lot of other features and functionality. But again, that's going to be up to you to tailor based on discovery, what capabilities and value you're going to show for your user. You don't have to show every single piece of that capability. Now, before we go any further, there is a little bit of prerequisite setup that needs to be done. And this, as you probably can imagine, is around security since our environments change with passwords. And there is an email portion of this that I want to make sure if you want to show it off, you update. I'm just going to go over to my EDM environment. Now, on here, I'm logged in as EPM Default Cloud Admin. And from here, what you're going to do is you're going to go into Tools, Access Control. And the two personas we're going to use today are Alex Smith and Carrie Lane. If I go under Manage Users, under Alex Smith, I can click the little gear icon under Actions and Edit. And you can paste in the password for your environment, as well as your address if you'd like to show off the email alerts that get generated. Do that for both Alex Smith and Carrie Lane, and you'll be good to go. Now, I'm going to go back and go ahead and set this up for when I come back to this from my slide deck. I always will pre-populate this with Alex Smith, which is my first persona in my demo scenario, as well as the password. All right, I'll hop back to the PowerPoint. Once again, this is to go through, again, a gold standard, some core pieces, cover a couple of key demo scenarios. As I mentioned, you might actually have additional ones. And in a subsequent session around bringing it all together from the level 3 training on EDM, you'll see where we can actually walk you through creating some custom or tailored content for your customer. But we're going to go through, again, I'm just going to touch on the EDM overview really quickly, just to re-educate and as a reminder kind of what EDM is and what it's used for customers. Then we're going to spend the bulk of the time in the two different demo scenarios I have created for you today, and I'm going to walk you through. I will be in and out of role. I will tell you that when I'm in and out, and let's go from there. The EDM overview, and again, there are lots of different varieties of this slide, but the key here is really to explain to you again that enterprise data management is all around aligning, managing, and governing core enterprise data structures and hierarchies centrally across our platform as well as other solutions as well. This is, as I mentioned, it can manage hierarchies, structures, mappings, for a whole host of systems, not just Oracle. This can manage changes for Oracle, non-Oracle, cloud, and on-premises. If the customer has Workday or they have Coupa for procurement, or they've got some other even homegrown systems, this still can manage those changes and prepare those changes to be consumed by downstream systems. This is also, it's imperative we talk about, this is meant to be owned and used by the business. We're going to empower business users who own change to be an interactive participant in the change process, all with control. And we don't want to scare IT here. They're going to still have control and security, and you'll see that throughout the demo. But this is going to allow the users, this is going to take them kind of start to finish through requesting a change, collaborating with their colleagues on change, approving, all the way through to sharing this across multiple applications and a full audit trail of that entire process. And not just for routine changes, but this helps with transformational events like modeling and onboarding acquisitions, modeling a reorg that's coming in a future year. Also, this will help accelerate their current business and financial transformations. If we're in a deal or a cycle where they're going through a large financial transformation, this should be a foundational element for that transformation. This is going to help them and is unique to Oracle in the fact that all vendors are going to tell our customers how great the new world's going to be. Hey, look at this shiny new object, right? This new ERP you're going to get, this new EPM. But Oracle is unique because it has EDM. It has this part of our solution that's not only going to help them once they get to the new world, manage and govern change, but this can actually help them get to the new world. We have a part of our solution within EDM that can help them transform their business, do their chart of account redesign, help them with upgrading to cloud and changing hierarchies and reporting structures. They can get to that new world with less risk and more value. The other slide that I feel is key and I use in every one of my presentations is I call this kind of my use case slide. I also almost use this sometimes in my discoveries because I'm going through each of these boxes and figuring out, okay, what part of change is impacting my customer and what are they struggling with? Now, the bottom half of this slide is table stakes. We know that routine changes are sometimes pretty difficult for them to manage. That's, hey, a new entity is getting added, or we had an org change, or a cost center is moving to a different roll-up, or we're adding 5 new departments or 3 new projects. We can get the routine change. But it's those transformational events that also bring upon change to our customers where we can help them with enterprise data management. Things like upgrading to cloud. Our customers aren't just lifting and shifting. They're redesigning their chart of accounts. They're taking reporting hierarchies that are 5 levels and going to 7 levels, or 5 levels to 3 levels, or they're introducing new dimensions into their analytics and reporting. Reorgs, mergers and acquisitions. We acquire a company. Oracle just went through this recently, and we're going to be bringing on a customer, a new company that has their own org structure, their own products and services they offer. How can we get those mapped into the Oracle standards quickly so we can get to consolidated reporting and move forward? Enterprise data management can really help them with a variety of different change events. But for this demo, we're going to focus on 2 key ones. One is we're going to add a new entity, and we're going to see how a business user can request a change, how that goes for approval and review, and then that one single change in the general ledger can update multiple systems, all with complete audit trail. You're also going to see how we can actually model chart of account redesign and have that mapping moving forward so that nothing is missed. And as the 2 systems continue to evolve, we can keep them in concert and synchronize as much as possible. Let's dive into these 2 demo scenarios. So number 1 is routine change management and governance. Again, this is part and parcel to enterprise data management, and this is something that I do in every one of my demos for the most part. And we're going to see where a business user, Alex Smith, who might just be a staff accountant, has been asked to make a change, add a new entity for some new business we're going to do in Latin America and Peru. You're going to see how easily you can add that change. How that single change request can get routed for approval to Carrie Lane, our assistant controller, or someone else that has approval rights in one of the user groups that needs to approve that change. How a lot of that information for Carrie Lane and even potentially for Alex can automatically be input for them. So that automation, how valuable that is, because that's actually driving consistency for the users and our customers. It's also going to streamline that process so that they can get back to the job they were hired for, not just a high-paid data entry clerk to make some changes. And how a single change in the general ledger can actually be shared across, in our scenario, general ledger, planning and budgeting, close consolidation, all with their unique perspectives, but keeping them all in concert with that single change and with a complete audit trail of all those changes. Let me hop over here, and I'm going to log in with Alex. He's going to come to a starting screen that is familiar with our customers. You're going to have seen this with our different parts of our solution. And on this starting screen for Alex, he gets an activity menu. Now, good thing for Alex, he's in the green. He has nothing he needs to work on that needs his attention right now. But you can see some of these categories. All changes go through requests. So any requests that have been assigned to him to work on, he could have a quick link to them here. Anything he submitted, he has visibility as to where they are in the workflow approval process. Anything that needs his approval, if he's part of an approval process, those will be surfaced up to him, and he'll get an email alert letting him know that. Maybe it's a request that he submitted that got pushed back because either their approver has some questions or things like that. Collaboration gets employed there. But he has nothing here. But as I mentioned, he's been tasked to add a new entity for business they're going to do in Peru. Users interact with their enterprise data in what we call views of their enterprise data. He goes into his view list, and he can see where he can add new accounts, account maintenance, but he's going to add a new entity. He's going to go into his entity maintenance view. Now, I'll call your attention to the fact that he only sees on entity maintenance view one piece of information here, or one system. It's the general ledger view of the world. Now, he sees this tree that he can expand and peruse down and traverse down as he sees fit. He knows that he's going to enter it. Peru is going to be in Latin America. He can see all the entities that are already there, Brazil, Argentina, all the way down to Mexico. Okay, now off to the right, he will see the properties and attribution that he has access to. Again, this can be tailored for the business user to keep it as simple as possible for them. But for any given entity, he can see the name and description and effective dating, and if it's been enabled or allow posting, some of the key general ledger properties that are specific. But that's it. Because he only has access to the GL view and entity maintenance, that's all he sees. But he's now ready to make a change. As I mentioned, all changes go through what's called a request. On the top one, he's going to choose to open a new request. The first thing I always like to do is to rename it so it's not a cryptic request 11149. On the top left, he can highlight this and say, adding new Peru entity. Update that, and it gives a nice friendly name, and you'll see where that comes in handy later. He also can add collaboration and commentary. So he can add a comment, maybe a justification, adding for new business in Peru, and save that. And you can see he can also have attachments, files. If there's any justification or documentation that goes along with it, he can. Also, we're not going to go through here, but you can at any point can download a template of this into Excel, and he can load a bulk load of items from Excel. It'll automatically attach the file. That's great for audit purposes. We're always going to know where he loaded the changes from, but it does allow the users to interact and use the tool they're familiar with in Excel. But in this singular change, he just wants to make a change and add a new entity. It's going to be 260 for Peru, he decides, or has been told. Now, couple of things here. Surely he can actually open this up and use the familial relationships like add child, add sibling. Those are very familiar, obviously, to our EPM users and customers. But what our customers told us was we want an easy button. We know that 90+% of changes behave like something that's already there. So can't we just copy something that's there and maybe make a few minor adjustments? And that's exactly what he can do. He's going to say he just wants to make a copy of 251 Mexico. He clicks copy, and that goes off and makes a copy. Now, we by default will name it copy of 251 because we don't know what he wants to name it. But that gives me an opportunity to talk about validations. Okay, there's a validation that pops up and it says, hey, copy of 251 is not a valid name. It can't be longer than the maximum length of 3. This is this proactive enforcement of validations that oftentimes in a manual world are floating around in people's heads, and they have to remember to apply these every single time consistently. We take that away from them, and we can actually now consistently enforce those every single time. If he tries to submit this request for copy of 251, it says, sorry, there's an error. You can't go any further. Now, I'm going to contrast that real quickly with the manual world, where if they're in a paper-based, a customer's in a paper-based or spreadsheet-based type of process where they're submitting changes, hey, someone could fat finger in a 4-digit code or put an invalid value, but not with enterprise data management. We're going to eliminate all that error up front, that back and forth time that's lost, and enforce that up front. He's going to go ahead and make that change and say, all right, it's going to be 260 is the name of it, or the numeric value. The description, he's going to change that to be Peru. And notice that as he makes these changes, it automatically revalidated, okay? And now the validation error has gone away because now it is a 3-digit code. It's already checking for uniqueness. 260 is not being used. He's good there. And from a user perspective, all he has to do is fill out the fields that have an asterisk. Those are required fields. The user gets a visualization and some indicators helping them know what's required. We already put in a name, and description US was automatically derived based on the description. These other 4, summary, enabled, allow posting, allow budgeting, which are required, all automatically set. That's that automation that we have in enterprise data management. We have no less than 4 different ways that we can automatically set these values for the user. Because again, what that means is that's going to streamline the process for the user. They can get back to more value-added work. It's going to be more consistently applied, so they're not putting in invalid values, and it's really going to help the overall process. Now, he also gets to visualize the change a bit. Notice the visual indicators. Anything that was edited has a pencil and is in yellow on the property screen. If I go over to my main pane here, in the hierarchy, notice that 260 has been added. I'm going to take the highlighting off for a second. You'll notice it's green with a plus sign. That's an indicator saying, hey, this is an addition to this. If he had deletes or moves, are all different color coded, and the user gets to visualize the impact to their system before they make this change. And that's huge. It's not this black box that, hey, I think I want to add a bunch of these changes. It's a WYSIWYG, which is what you get. Here's how it's going to impact your system. And that way he knows whether or not he wants to make these changes. And finally, on the left, I'll go back to the main item screen. It starts to build what I call a shopping cart of changes. Notice that he is going to add the plus sign to the general ledger tab 260. Now, if he had more changes here, it would build this list for him. And again, that's just his shopping cart of changes for this request called adding new Peru entity. But that's it. That's all Alex has to do here. Alex can go ahead and say, all right, I'm ready to go. I'm going to submit this change. He submits it. It goes through final validation, says it was successfully submitted. Now, he will notice something. If he ever goes back in here, he'll notice it's still green with a plus sign. It's not in the black and white. It hasn't been committed to this hierarchy. And off to the left, he'll notice that request, adding new Peru entity, is in flight. And if he inspects it, he can actually see some information, some key details about the changes he submitted. But more importantly, in the workflow tab, which is usually the culprit, what is holding this request up? What is the next step to get this approved in the system? And you'll notice that all changes for the corporate company dimension or segment have to get one approval from someone in these 2 invitee group. 5 people in the super user group or 3 people in the approvers group 2, one of those needs to actually approve this. They will actually get an email notification. I will bring that up and just bring that onto my screen to show you. For example, here's Carrie Lane, my assistant controller, that says, hey, you've been invited to approve a request called adding new Peru entity. Get some key information. It was submitted by Alex Smith. They can actually click on that link, or as the second part of our process, I'm actually going to log off with Alex for a second, and I'm going to log back in with Carrie Lane. Carrie now, the next time comes in, again, could click on the link from the email, but also the next time Carrie comes into his main Springboard, he'll notice, hey, there's a request for my approval. I get a nice big indicator here, and if I click it, Carrie can go in and see exactly what he has to work on today. Okay, adding new Peru entity. All right, let me click on that and see what needs to be done today. Now, on the left-hand side, again, he can see a list of what's being added. If someone has requested 260 get added to the general ledger, he can review the commentary. He looks at Alex and says, oh, adding for new business in Peru. Okay, yeah, we are doing new business in Peru, so this makes sense. And then in the main screen, it sees the same visualization that Alex did on how it's going to impact the general ledger tree structure. And off to the right, the same properties and attribution that, again, we can either give Carrie or not give him what's called enrichment rights. Is he allowed to make changes, or is he just here to approve or push back? Now, you will notice a couple other things that I want to call out. Because Carrie has more permissions, instead of just seeing entity maintenance for the general ledger system, he's also gets to see how do entities look in planning. Now, notice that 260 is being requested to be added to general ledger. But if he goes over to the planning tab, or what we call the viewpoint, notice very different hierarchy than the general ledger. And as he expands it down, it even uses a different numbering or naming scheme, and it has C underscore for that corporate company or that entity. Notice there is no C underscore 260. And also for the planning and budgeting system, off to the right, the properties. Remember in general ledger, we had allow posting, allow budgeting, some of these others, but these are very specific to planning and budgeting. things like smart lists and hierarchy type, plan type, data storage. Remember, every system has its own unique perspectives and requirements it needs when a change comes through. And without having something like enterprise data management to manage all these, this would all have to be done by multiple people in a very manual fashion. And similarly, we have the closed consolidation hierarchy as well, which once again, similar to planning, but not exactly. And it also has its own unique requirements, and it doesn't have 260 yet. And that makes sense because Alex has requested 260. It hasn't been approved yet by Carrie's in here to approve it. He can see how it affects the general ledger. He looked at the commentary, looked at all the naming conventions or all the inputs, and says, yeah, this is good to go. Now, in the top, the approver does have a few different actions they can do. They can push this back to Alex with some commentary. Maybe he needs to change something. Maybe there's already an entity there. Can flat out reject it. Or in this case, Carrie's going to say, nope, I approve this, and can add a message. Okay for the GL. Again, he's still okaying it for the general ledger. And now that has been successfully approved, you'll notice that it's no longer green with the plus sign. 260 is committed to this hierarchy now. It has been approved for the general ledger. Okay, but a couple other things that I want to point out here is you'll notice that if I go over to the planning tab and open this hierarchy up, where we didn't have C_260 before, we do have it now. This is simply where we can link these together. Okay, let's think of the admin over in whoever's responsible in planning and budgeting said, listen, every time a change happens in a general ledger that I need to be made aware of and put into my hierarchy, I want to get that change. Planning and budgeting is basically listening for any changes that go to the general ledger. And in this case, I'm showing it as automated as possible. It's automatically going to add that into the hierarchy. And it's also going to send an email alert to that planning admin saying, hey, it's ready for you to use. You don't have to do anything. Now, I know that can sound a little scary for some planning admins. That's just the most automated we can make it. You can have any level of interaction in between. This could have actually placed this in the planning hierarchy, but not committed it and left it open for an assigned user in planning to say, hey, here's this new change in the general ledger. I've placed it where I think you want it in planning, or we can derive where it needs to go in planning. Is that okay? And it still allows them to review and okay that change. But I wanted to show in this example how we could automate a single change in the general ledger, it update my planning application, all these properties on the right. You didn't see Alex or Carrie input any of these. Were all automatically driven off of, I said, one of four ways: the copy command. They can be inherited based on where it goes in the hierarchy from the parent value. It can be derived based on business logic, or it can be defaulted. Again, that's hugely valuable in automating these changes so we can free the users up to more value-added work instead of a bunch of selecting from combo boxes or hand keying in changes. I'll tell you one example I had of a customer a few years ago or many years ago was a bank that was going through a change like this that said, hey, every time we add a new cost center, which sounds so simple, there are 700 different touch points where users have to input values. We were able to, with a solution like this, get it down to about 50 inputs that were required by a variety of different users in the process, but the other 650 could either be derived, defaulted, or inherited. And that was a huge value to them. And not only streamlining the process, but making a more consistent error-free process. And lastly, we showed it in planning. If I go to closed consolidation, same thing, that C260 also got added to the hierarchy there. One change in the general ledger was able to be automatically pushed out to not just the general ledger, but planning and budgeting, closed consolidation, and any other number of Oracle, non-Oracle, cloud, or on-premise systems that our customers have. Now, to round this scenario out, I always like to log back in as the admin, EPM default cloud admin, just to take a look at, okay, now days, weeks, months later, someone says, hey, those changes that went in for that Peru entity, who made those? When was it made? What did it affect? So a user can always go into a request history. And in this case, you'll notice I've cleared everything out, but they can search on requests. But in this case, I see my request here, adding new Peru entity. And at a high level, I can see that Alex submitted it, Carrie modified it, he was the approver, but I can go in and actually click on it and see more details. Again, some high level details. Okay, it was added 260 Peru to the Financials Cloud or GL application. All the commentary along the way, that entire process are captured here. All the attachments, if we had attachments, whether it's supporting documentation or if they had loaded bulk load of items from Excel file, that would be there. The workflow tab. Now we're done with the workflow. We saw that the last time we went here, it actually gave us information on who was the next person in line to approve it. But we can always now see the history of the workflow. This is the entire history from the initial requester, Alex, all the way through to anything that was updated, requested, approved. Carrie Lane approved it. If there were changes along the way, if Carrie had enriched it, you could see the old value and the new value. And what I love here is the fact of a lot of times our customers want to know what all systems were affected in this change. I can see a lineage of this change. I can see that adding new Peru entity is in completed status for the general ledger. But notice this dotted line, it actually spawned another request, and this request affected both consolidation and close and planning, and it was automatically completed. That's that auto submission that was done to update those other two. This gives a great lineage and a great audit history of all the impacted systems from that change. And last but not least, if you do need the nth level of detail on the audit trail of all these changes, I can open this up for this new 260 Peru entity and see all the ads, where it was inserted in the hierarchy, any properties are updated. This is the laundry list of audit trail for that change. Okay. And then lastly, since we're on the topic of audit trail, is now that was for one request. But if let's say internal audit comes, and I've had several customers ask this recently, hey, they came by the other day and said, we need all your new additions you've added in the last 90 days. Can you give us a list of those? Well, in a manual process, think of how hard that would be to go through emails and phone calls are out the window, text messages, I can't get to those. Trying to come up with that audit trail. Here, we can go to our detailed audit history, and I have some filters at the top here. Time frame, last 90 days. Now, I could give a date range, or I can say, in the last 90 days, action. What action do I want to see? Any of the deletes, the removes? No, they said anything that's been added. I click add, say okay, and here I can hand it off. Oh, 260 was added to Financials Cloud, C260 to close consolidation, and C260 to corporate planning. I can see the user. Casey Brown was the one that was the EPM admin that accepted those changes automatically. I can see who actually created the change in the general ledger. That's Alex Smith. Date timestamp. I've got this that I can now download and hand it off to audit, and I'm good to go. Something that could have taken weeks to compile manually, now I can do a matter of seconds with Enterprise Data Management. Okay, now at this point, again, out of role, I would ask if there's any questions from that. But again, just recapping, you saw Alex go in and make a change, request a change to the general ledger. It got routed to Carrie Lane, an assistant controller, to approve it. Very quickly, he could review it, approve it, possibly enrich it. And then once approved, that one singular change in the general ledger updated 3 totally different systems that needed that change in all slightly different ways, all with complete audit trail. At this point, I would just go back and recap that now that we've gone through the demo, the value then around routine change. Like I keep going back to the fact that by automating things, by governing these changes, by not allowing inaccurate inputs, it's going to free your resources up for more value-added work. Again, once again, a customer told us, right, I feel like I've just hired a bunch of high-paid data entry clerks because I hired them to be an analyst, but they're just keeping the lights on with these changes and managing them. You can implement changes much quicker with less risk, eliminating a lot of that back and forth that goes on. And did you mean to put this 3-digit value? No, I need a 4-digit. Did you mean to do that? What did you mean by this? And there's a lot of back and forth that goes on in a manual process that we eliminate. We're going to increase efficiency, reduce redundancy, not having to have a user have to make a change in 5 different places, 10 different places, 15 different places, making that in one place and have the system automatically do it for you. Automating for consistency, streamlining, make it simple for the business user, making sure that all the changes are governed, taking those business rules that are locked in people's brains and having a systematized way to employ those every single time. And also making sure that all your changes are aligned across these various systems. Now it doesn't matter if I pull a number or a report out of planning or the general ledger or close consolidation, I can rest assured that change that was made was reflected in all those. My numbers are accurate, my reporting is accurate, and I'm getting to those insights in a much more valuable way. And lastly is audit time. There's a lot of time with auditing of changes and trying to put those together. By having audit as a foundational component of enterprise data management, all that is done for you.